Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for joining my Legal Live today on Director Duties and Good Governance. So, quick intro. So, my name is Nathalie Romain. I'm a Client Legal Director at the Legal Director and have been an in-house lawyer for over 20 years. And I've worked across a number of different businesses, different sizes, different sectors, jurisdictions, regulated, non-regulated. And I've found one thing to be true throughout my career, which is irrespective of the size of an organisation and what it does, that those organisations that prioritise good governance tend to flourish and have the best chance at longevity. Now, in the first 5 months of 2025, insolvencies were at levels similar to those in 2023, and in 2023 that marked a 30-year high post-COVID. And this is the time when directors face real scrutiny and the risk of personal liability is particularly real. So what I want to do today is to, run a pretty pragmatic session, give you some sense of what governance is, what you can do about it, how you can get yourselves and your businesses in good shape from a governance perspective, what directors' duties actually are, what the Companies Act says, and a bit more then about personal liability and the things you can do to make sure that you are as protected as possible. And then I'll finish on a few of the Companies House reforms. Now, I'm going to do a little poll here, which is how, if you just all let me know how you feel when someone mentions governance. I've got a fair idea, but there may be some outliers who do feel excited, and I'll be very happy to, have a good chat with you about governance afterwards if that's the case, because I quite like it as a topic, hence today's webinar. Yeah, stress. Not unexpected. So here's a quote, and you're going to get these slides afterwards, so don't feel like you need to read it all now. But a lot of people get themselves in a pickle about governance, and really, at its most basic level, governance is, about how a company is directed and controlled, and the leaders and the directors taking accountability for those decisions. And when that doesn't happen very well, we see examples of that poor practice in the news. Now, obviously, Carillion, I'm sure everybody is aware of, but it's a very big business. However, some of the issues in their business, translate to companies of all sizes. And so just to give you some of the figures in Carillion, which the poor governance of the organisation led to its collapse, but it left over £1.5 billion worth of debt at liquidation. There was a £800 to £900 million pension deficit, which the pension pension regulator had to pick up. They owed creditors over £2 billion, and 20,000 UK jobs were put at risk, and I think eventually 1,500 were made redundant. And the government in the end ended up paying £150 million worth of towards keeping key services running and taking on contracts directly. And these, their collapse was primarily down to very aggressive accounting practices, premature revenue recognition. Can everybody hear me? Can you put your thumbs? Louise, can you hear me? I've just had a message to say that the sound isn't very good.
It is a bit patchy for me. I think we'll give it 5 more minutes and see. I think it might be a Wi-Fi problem from your end, maybe.
I've got full. Okay, shall I go on to a different Wi-Fi just to? Right, shall I keep going?
Yeah, keep going, and then we'll cross the bridge in 5 minutes if it doesn't get better.
Okay. All right. So one of the other key issues was the failure of the board to challenge poor management decisions. So they had inexperienced non-execs, and there was a real focus on corporate pay and bonuses. And even when the company was in financial trouble, the the board, the exec, and and shareholders were being paid disproportionate amounts given the state of the company's health, financial health. Now, we talk about directors' duties, and they are statutory duties. They're captured in the Companies Act, and they are fairly numerous, and they can feel quite burdensome, but actually when you break it down, I think what they're focusing on is that you're going to run your company in a way that's going to promote the success of that company, that you're going to consider the long-term consequences of your decisions. You're not going to act in a way that puts your own personal interests above those of the company. You're going to be fair to your suppliers and your employees and your customers, and you're going to listen to challenge. So I don't think the duties at a high level are that surprising when you consider the responsibilities that you hold as directors. Now, one of the things that I think about is getting governance fit, and there's a bit of an analogy here when I was thinking about what it meant, and I spend probably I would say a disproportionate amount of time thinking about my own health and fitness, and what a healthy diet is, and I doom scroll and find out that I've been doing press ups wrong, and that I need to take this mushroom and collagen powder to look 25 again, and all of that, very overcomplicate things when really it's probably much simpler. Do some exercise, eat healthily, avoid all the things that we know are bad for us. And I think it's similar with governance. So you can end up going down rabbit holes, and really you can exercise good governance being pragmatic and proportionate to the size of your business. So what's right for a 100 million pound business isn't necessarily right for a 10 million pound business. So you can be you can look at your business and think about what's right for it and still fulfill all your duties without really putting in place very sophisticated, very complicated processes, procedures, and spending tons and tons of time on it. And that's some of the things I can talk to you about today in terms of how to be proactive and how to actually get yourself started on the journey. And this slide talks a bit about some things I've just mentioned in terms of what governance is aimed at and what the director's duties are are aimed at achieving and helping you understand what your duties are. So we talk about some of the practical elements, and when you're running a business, I get it, especially SMEs, you've got lists of things to do that you're never going to get to. And I think that really with governance, some of these fixes are, they don't take that long, and you only need to sort of create a process once. You create a template, and then you just build it into your everyday operational needs. And here's a list, and this is not by any means all you have to do, but these are some of the things that I recommend to help you ensure your compliance. Now, a lot of SMEs, especially smaller SMEs, you don't really have a formal board, which means that it's very hard to demonstrate your decision making and the rationale for those strategic decisions, which might affect members, shareholders, employees, customers, etc. So, I would always strongly recommend that you have a board, even if it's informal, and just make sure that that board has a good spread of experience and it's populated with people who aren't afraid to challenge. Because what that can do is ensure that you're demonstrating that you're complying with section 172, your duty to promote the success of the company. You're listening to people. You've got good people on your team who will ensure that you're looking at things holistically. And equally important, if you have a board and have regular meetings, is to keep a note of those meetings. So document them. You know, have you can have a very basic minutes template and document the key decisions that are being taken in those meetings. You don't have to write down absolutely everything that's being said, but the key decisions that are made and the rationale behind them, what led you to that decision, what things were taken into account when you made that decision. Now, other things which, as you get bigger, can help you with your compliance, especially your probably your financial compliance and your regulatory, and to manage your legal risk, are committees. So have, you know, committees, you sort of regularly see remuneration committees, which really have a good eye on executive pay and bonuses. You have your audit committee, which ensures that you're complying with your financial obligations, and then risk. And alongside the risk committee, you would have your framework. So you would have a risk register, which is really important. And a lot of these things are key if you want funding, or if you're thinking about investment in the sort of near to medium term, because investors will want to see how your business is being run and how you're ensuring that you are compliant with sorts of rules and regs. And so having a risk register will be very handy for the due diligence of an investor. And that's also about transparency, which a lot of these requirements are the underlying themes are transparency. So, have your risk management framework that feeds into your risk committee, or somebody that's responsible for risk. Have your, your appetite for risk. So, who needs to sign off contracts at a certain level? What does that look like? What's your view on unlimited liability? What sorts of indemnities do you accept? All the things that, an investor or bank are going to be keen to understand. And then, where you have a number of shareholders, members, ensure that you are giving them information, make sure that they are aware of, key strategic decisions, things that they need to know about. And then moving down the list, you can see here, obviously treat your suppliers fairly, treat your customers fairly. Have a transparent complaints process. And also, one of the things which is really important is, if you do process or control or both personal data, make sure you're compliant, make sure your privacy notices are up to date, make sure your policies are there, because, and we'll talk about personal liability in a bit, but there's liability, huge fines attached to data breaches, which I'm sure a lot of you are aware of. And so, data protection is a key part of governance as well, where you deal with a lot of personal data. If you're in a regulated industry, also, you need to make sure that you have somebody on point to ensure that you're complying with those regs. And, remember, regs change very regularly. And so someone who's keeping you up to date with what your current responsibilities are. And then some other things which I think are important, and this isn't often done actually, but have a job description for your directors, what their key obligations are, what their what their key responsibilities are. And when you've got a new director coming in, give them some directors training, give them some idea of what the duties are that they're expected to discharge, so that they start with a good understanding on which they can build. And and thereafter, have periodic training just to refresh your board. And this can really help in the event of any issues. You can show that you're committed because you've actually taken the time to sort of share with your directors, ensure that they understand their duties. And then a couple of other things: conflicts of interest policy, very important, because it's a duty to obviously avoid conflicts and not put your personal interests over those of the company. doesn't have to be complicated, and you can have a conflicts register. It can be an Excel spreadsheet. It doesn't have to be fancy. And then also, if you're a decent sized organization, really you should have a whistleblowing policy which encourages wrongdoing to be reported. So there are a few of the practical things that you should have in your toolbox that you can actually start to put in place to make you more compliant, to demonstrate that you understand what your duties are as directors, and then to give investors confidence, to give your suppliers confidence that your business is being well run, and give your customers some a decent experience of trading with you. Louise, could we have the poll, please? So I'm just going to run a quick poll before I move on to managing personal liability. So what do you think is the most common reason directors get disqualified in the UK? And there's 4 options here. Yeah, so actually all quite close, but it is the first, so continuing to trade while the company is insolvent. And often there's no maliciousness in that. Often it's because I think companies don't actually realise that they're potentially heading for insolvency, and that's often because they're not they're not meeting regularly enough, they're not keeping an eye on their financial position in a close enough way early on, and it is very serious. So if it does all go wrong, directors do have personal liability. Now obviously you do have directors and officers insurance, and I'd always encourage you to have a very robust policy in place, very, very important. But it's not always enough, and there were British Home Stores, which is pretty an old case now, but the directors have just been hit with £18 million worth of fines, and the D&O policy didn't cover all of that. It covered some of it. Now obviously that's again a very big complicated business, but it was really the basics that they were found to have failed in, which was exercising their independent judgment, failing to exercise reasonable care, skill and diligence, and failing to meet their duties to have regard to creditors once the company was nearing insolvency. And so you can see here that personal liability can arise in any number of ways, and it is taken seriously by the courts and by our regulators. And so the thing to take away from that is that record keeping is essential, ensuring, as I've said, that you've got some kind of record of your decisions as directors, D&O insurance, and making sure that you've got a process in place for when times might get hard, so that you're not at risk of falling into wrongful trading or not doing right by your creditors. So there are a few different offences under the Insolvency Act. Section 214, wrongful trading. You've got breach of fiduciary duty, which is failing to act in the best interest of creditors, and then there's also fraudulent trading. And so you need to be aware of those and make sure that you take advice early if there are any issues with your solvency. And there are a few other things that you can do, and we do see this. If you're a director, just you know, please avoid giving personal guarantees wherever you can. Always sign contracts on behalf of the company, not in a personal capacity. And you know, maintain your company's house filings. And I know it's a headache, and I know that it's another thing on the to-do list. But you know, directors do get disqualified for failing to keep up with their filings. And so, you know, on top of all of that, you've got your other kind of groups, if you like, of obligations, which might be health and safety, environmental, GDPR, and you know, depending on the type of business you're running. So you know, you need to keep up, you know, with all of your regulatory obligations, as well as your company's house and your Insolvency Act obligations as well. And you know, finally, I'm just going to talk for a couple of minutes about the Companies House reforms. I'm sure a lot of you are aware of these, but they are introducing mandatory identity verification from the 18th of November. Now, new directors appointed on and after that date will have to make sure that they've done their ID verification, or they won't be appointed. There is some phasing for existing directors. It's all a bit unclear, but I think, you know, by the time you file your next confirmation statement, you must make sure that you have done your ID verification, and there are various ways to do that. We can help with that. Let us know if you need any help. And there are other things. So PO boxes are no longer acceptable as a registered address. So Companies House are trying to clean up, basically. And they're just taking more of a proactive stance. So they're going to, you know, I think query more filings. So do make sure that your filings are on time, are in the right form, are digital where possible. And you know, they are abolishing the central register. So if that's how you hold your register of members, you'll need to bring that in-house. So you know, most of these are relevant. Well, all of them are relevant to you. I mean, it depends. There's a new corporate offence for large organisations of failure to prevent fraud. If you fall into that category, you know, that's a whole different ball game, which we can talk about separately. But you know, it is worth knowing that there are extremely large fines and offences attached to that new offence in the Economic Crime Act that's been brought in, which is behind all of these changes. I mean, fortunately, Companies House have rowed back on planned changes to make small companies file enhanced accounts. We don't know if that's going to be a permanent rowback, but at the moment, they've put that on hold temporarily due to a lot of lobbying. But they're pushing ahead with making tax digital for sole traders. And so if you are a sole trader, you will need to buy new accountancy software for April 26. If you are generating more than £50,000 a year. So I think, you know, there's a few things to get on top of with the reforms to make sure that you keep your house in order and don't fall foul of the new Companies House mandates. Okay, so we've got 5 minutes left. I'm not sure if there are any questions, Louise.
No questions at all at the moment.
No
But if anybody has any, please put them in the chat.
So let me know if you've got any questions. If you can't think of any now, but come off the call and think, oh gosh, that was a lot, but now I've processed it, I've got a few. Then please do drop me an email. I'm more than happy to have an email exchange with you. I'm also offering a free 30-minute sort of governance call, just to, you know, if you want to run through some things free of charge, no obligations. So I'm very happy to do that for you as well. I know it's a massive topic. I've whizzed through it at speed.
Natalie,
So yeah.
We have one question from David.
Okay.
It says, please clarify item 3. If register held in-house, how will Company House know who are the directors, and in turn, how do they validate with PSCs?
David, do you want to drop me an email and we can add that to the, I'll send a Q&A around with Louise, we can send a Q&A around.
Okay, yeah, definitely.
I think it's not a quick or easy answer. A lot of this stuff is quite opaque at the moment. So David, I'll get back to you. Any other questions? Okay.
No. Brilliant.
Great. Well, I hope you found that helpful. I'm always up for feedback. So let me know if there was something I didn't cover, if there's other things, other topics that are, you're keen to hear about. And yeah, we'll see what we can do.
Right, thank you very much. All the slides and the webinar will be emailed after this. All the best. Thank you.
Everyone.